Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. This one's going to be for K305 The Metal Clan. And this is a really good episode. As I said at the start of this book with the reviews, I think the side plots in book 3 are very, very well done. And this Zaofu plot here, getting into Lin and Suyin and getting introduced to like her family and so on, is a really, really fun part of this book, in that, Lin wasn't a big part of book 2, which, I don't mind too much. I think they used her, okay for what they wanted to do, kind of primarily give Mako an arc. Here we get back into that and actually explore some of, I suppose, Lin's family, and specifically some family issues. Don't get resolved or kind of really touched on enough until, I suppose, next time out, and then they continue on with it as a book 4 thing as well. But this is the start of a lot of really, really good stuff. Otherwise, there's an interesting enough little Zahir kind of plot. We'll get into that as we go through this episode. But just another example of book 3, like introducing a lot of very, I suppose, important, well done, more minor characters. In that, the introduction of Sue here, I think she's a good character. Similarly with Opal. Wei Wing, who on, Batar Jr., I suppose, is kind of, I suppose, not properly really introduced here, and in a way that that becomes his kind of character arc, his motivation for book 4, sort of, in a way, kind of represents, I suppose, part of that. But yeah, let's get into this. So we pretty much are just heading straight for Zaofu. We hear the immediate report that that's where we're heading. Korra is sort of dismissing the kind of villains being after her, which I think, as I talked about before, I'm not the biggest fan of that, how she's just found out this like really, really important information that, again, was the core of a huge arc of her kind of disagreeing with like Tenzin and her father, and now all of a sudden the truth behind that, she just kind of dismisses it. It's a little bit like are you really not going to actually play up any sort of character motivation on that? But it is what it is. As I said, Korra doesn't have much of an arc in this book, and it's okay. It's just, I suppose, you kind of just have to enjoy the scenes that you do get with Korra, because she's not really getting much development here. They attempt to do some stuff here of like having Korra like form some opinions on the world leaders, but as I said, it doesn't really go anywhere. We'll get into that scene. But basically, yeah, we're straight into the idea of just Lin. The second she hears that this new airbender's in Zaofu, the Metal Clan, immediately is like, no, we can't go here. I prefer to go to Republic City. And once they do go there, stays behind, doesn't want anyone to know that she is there. And Korra is, suspicious of this immediately. And I love the reveal when it does happen of like, we're introduced to Sue. We get the setup of like the Metal Clan seem to almost treat Toph as like the inspiration for the foundation of the city in a way, because she's the first metal bender. Pretty cool thing with the, I suppose, very intriguing little idea of, okay, Toph isn't here. But the reason that she's not here is because she actually left. Previously, she used to visit a lot to search for enlightenment. And based on everything that we as Avatar fans know about Toph, from the comics, from her in the show, Toph enlightenment, those two things don't go together. And it obviously speaks to the fact of like, what happened in Toph's life. Of course, the characters have gone through so much time. If we meet any of them still alive, obviously some of them have died since then. Toph has obviously been through a lot if she is searching for enlightenment. And just the fact that we get revealed here with Sue telling Korra that Lin's my sister, then the full reveal comes out, half sister, and they specify it, same mother, different fathers. Well, I suppose I'll talk a little bit later on about the whole, like, the fact that I suppose we still don't fully know the full extent of this, like who Sue's father is. I'll get to that in a minute, but just hearing that Toph like had this sort of a struggle in a way, like it's weird that there's so much information we don't have. Like, we just don't know anything really about like Sokka, if he had kids, if he and Suki ever properly, got married or anything like that. They never even confirm if like it's Zuko and Mei. It's pretty much Katara and Aang that they sort of stick to, and that's really about it. But then confirming here that Toph has kids, but she never had, I suppose, like a substantial relationship. In that we get confirmed here that neither of the girls knew their father, so they just really only had a relationship with their mother, which serves to basically make the fathers not be overly important and place the focus more on like, wow, what happened with Toph? But I think it's interesting setup of just there is a big issue between Sue and Lin that you don't really get into all that much here, outside of like I suppose the core ideas of Lin when she chooses to take offense to I suppose what Sue says, and you can sort of see where the issue comes from. It's Sue when she was younger was always kind of free flowing, rebellious and stuff like that. Lin always stuck to the side of the law and followed a fairly similar path to her mother. And so the idea of obviously something happened and Sue being very, very forgiving of people who made mistakes and is always talking about second chances and leaving the past in the past. And Lin, obviously, we know, is someone who kind of carries those things with her of like, back in book 1, her and Tenzin kind of becoming friends again. They maybe should have maybe hit it home a little harder, but that scene is meant to be them properly talking to each other for the first time since their breakup. In that Lin tends to really remember any of these things, and she struggles to, I suppose, get past them. And so here's this setup of some issue with her sister that she still is frustrated with her sort of attitude towards it now. It doesn't come to light fully here, but clearly that's the core frustration of why Lin wanted nothing to do with Sue, why they've never really visited each other, and why so much of what Sue sort of talks about here to us is obviously giving insight into Sue's character, but for Lin it's just demonstrating the frustrating aspects of her sister's personality of just kind of no one, in a way, like any mistake that you make, you never have to kind of actually like accept those kind of flaws and those mistakes, because you can just change and move past them. And it's obviously meant to signify the two characters' different takes on things, and like, yeah, Sue perhaps is a bit too easy to get past these things, whereas Lin holds on to them too much. But I like the sort of simmering tension for this as the first episode, and it really, like, for the most part, it's just like, okay, they've got a kind of fractured relationship, but it doesn't seem like crazy intense. There's clearly something here, some kind of deep-rooted issues, but it's the scene at the very end with Lin and Opal, where Lin just completely blanks Opal, really rude to her, and Opal being presented as such a nice character, it really helps to get across the issues that Lin is facing, and the fact that she is so far down this road where she really is turning people against her, and that Korra and Lin actually are fairly close. Like, we saw that develop in book 1, and to see Korra just be like, what was that? Like Opal is such a nice character. Like, why would you do that? Like, your sister's right. You are just this kind of lonely, bitter old woman, and it's harsh, but it's meant to sort of be a bit of a wake up call of like, Lin has to at some point decide whether she wants to address these issues or like keep them with her forever. And it's an impressive arc, and it serves to like really create a distinction between Lin, who has this really clear cut arc they're setting up well here, and the Red Lotus, who it's just mystery, and then the payoffs are not good at all. But Zaofu itself, I think, ends up being, like, along with Republic City, I think one of Korra's best like new locations. I think it becomes a truly sort of memorable location because of book 3 and book 4, in that you think of Omashu, you think of Ba Sing Se, the different like the Fire Nation Royal Capital, Southern Water Tribe, Northern Water Tribe, the different air temples. And now I think you also include Zaofu, just because of the the unique take on like architecture, how modern it is, it being a metal city within the Earth Kingdom is a very cool idea, given that metal bending is more prevalent around the world. And just the statues of Toph and just the philosophy as well of the city, that it's not just a unique visual place, but they sort of characterize it as a place where, because its inspiration for its creation comes from Toph, and how she brought earthbending to this whole other level, creating a new form of bending and metal bending. The philosophy of anyone in Zaofu is to try and achieve your ultimate potential and always strive to kind of be better. And in a way that sort of adds into, I suppose, some of the kind of character arc they begin to give to Opal. The episode focuses more on Opal's sort of intro here, whereas it's, I think, the next coming episodes that really get into her like story arc. But we'll talk about Opal in a second. Just, I really, really do like Zaofu and what it adds to the series, because it's not just a case of like, oh, here's one of Toph's daughters, the leader of this city, but it's also a whole bunch of new characters that we sort of care about, a very different approach. It's the introduction of basically our two villains for next season as well, which we'll talk about. And it's just an important place that they kind of place a lot of plot points on. So I do really like that. So yeah, let's talk about Opal and I suppose the other family members as well. As I said, Opal, I think, just a very nice character. And in a way, that's a cool little thing to do, to just have a character who is just very pleasant, nice, kind of polite, but in a way that's meant to signify a kind of aspect of her character that, if that's all there is, is she being held back in some way? And we sort of begin to see that she's not exactly really being allowed to make her own choices in terms of where she wants to go with her life. And given that they're in the city where you're trying to fulfill your ultimate potential, all of a sudden, Opal is the one being held back. And who's she being held back by? Her mother, but also the leader of this whole town, who's more or less established this philosophy. And that's the arc with Opal. And it's what I suppose Bolin and Opal go through in like the next episode, of just lacking in confidence about trying to fulfill their kind of dream in a way of like Bolin and metal bending, and how much he kind of respects Toph and like has always kind of thought of her as like a hero. And then Opal, clearly her getting airbending, we're really meant to see it as almost that she didn't really know what her direction was before getting airbending, but now that she has airbending, she does truly want to pursue that. And the scene that's really meant to signify it is that Korra is meant to suggest, of course, that like, okay, since you're like a family member of like Team Avatar, you should be all on board for like going to the air temple to train properly. But finding out that Sue wants Opal to be trained here and is holding on to her a little bit too much, you begin to see the problem here, not giving Opal the freedom, and again, airbending freedom, the sort of philosophy type thing going on there. So I think there's a lot of potential in this episode with how they set that up, because you see that Opal's a natural. She does a quick little airbending kind of test, kind of circle walking with Korra, and it works well for her. And then they also set up the start of the relationship with Bolin. And again, it's the simplicity of book 3 with how they start these relationships. Kai and Jinora, Opal here, and Bolin. Simple things, not trying to create too much drama. Just slight little issues, like with Kai being the kind of rebel and kind of constantly escaping, and Jinora's kind of reaction to that. Here it's Bolin actually for once sort of being like oblivious in a way to like, oh, like this girl's attractive, but is she my type? I'm so used to like always wanting like being attracted to, as Mako says, the crazy mover star or the ice princess or something like that. And he actually ignores the fact that from the get-go, Opal actually likes him, and Mako can see that, but he can't. And how Bolin's reaction to this is to suddenly try and purposefully kind of charm her in a way, and that ends up actually like turning her off because he's acting so weird. But I like that they kind of have a good communication, that even though you know going in Bolin's going to crash and burn here, you sort of wonder like, okay, how's Opal gonna like handle Bolin kind of coming on strong? But she speaks her mind and just says that I don't like the way you're talking to me, and immediately Bolin's just like, oh, I'm sorry, and you see his like actual, you know, funny, slightly awkward personality come out, which is what she sort of liked in the first place. And you see the kind of chemistry develop between them to the point where like it's almost that they're a couple by the end of the episode, because they're just presenting it. And you know, it's quick, it's fast, but I don't really mind that, because it's just you know, it ends up being one of the more good relationships within the show, and it's obviously much better done than all of the crazy drama stuff that they do with the other relationships. And then where they go with this in like book 4, they actually create like a good drama between this relationship, to actually, because it's not really drama, it's just an issue that they have to deal with as a couple, and that is that Bolin has seemingly gone in with the wrong side, and how he redeems himself from that, and how quick is Opal to forgive him or not, and so on. So I think Opal is a really well done character, like Kai, of just being introduced and immediately kind of being likable and having a little substance to her, like the way they use her in the Lynn scene at the end to get across just how affected Lynn is by the return here and meeting Sue again, and all of the frustrations coming back to the boil, and just seeing how Opal was so excited to meet Lynn, and suddenly it's this horrible person who's being mean to her. So really cool stuff, and just the obvious kind of arc here of Opal wants to go to the air temples. As for the others in the family, Wei and Wing, you know, the athletes, obviously most of the family is metal benders, outside of Sue's husband, Batar, and Batar Jr., and obviously Opal is an airbender instead, but just that they're the athletes. They've created this kind of metal bending game, and they're kind of there to just kind of be the more kind of combat focused two of the group. You can I think tell based on where they go with those two that they're sort of probably the most in line to be the next rulers of Zaofu, if that's the way they're going to go about doing it, because they definitely, I think, you don't get too much on their personalities, but just in terms of that, they're always the two, like, beside Sue to sort of back her up. I think you get the impression that they're kind of meant to be the kind of closest in sort of approach to Sue. Because Huan obviously is so distracted being the artist and having his unique personality. You don't get too much on him. And then Batar and Batar Jr., again, you don't get too much on Batar. He's just there. He's the architect, as we got explained to us. And then Batar Jr., the fact that he doesn't get an introduction. It's just mentioned that, oh yeah, that guy who walked past, that's my oldest son. You don't even get his name here, even though we later find out it's Batar Jr. And it's, I think, meant to signify that here is the character arc for Batar Jr. He has the exact same name as his father. He tends to do the exact same kind of things in terms of they're both architects / engineers. But he's not getting the credit for it because his father is the one who created Zaofu. And they obviously play on this sort of off-screen. They touch on it a little bit in book 4, but it's not too much of a focus, really. Like here, especially, it's not about Batar. But it is interesting that they introduce him here, and then he comes back in as a villain later on. Similarly with Kuvira, I believe she is one of the dancers that we see here, that's doing the whole performance thing with Sue. And then later on, we get properly introduced to her in a remember this character sort of way in a couple of episodes' time. And that's cool. Like it's good setup, I think. It's just a thing about book 4 where I wish they'd done a little bit more on that. But that's book 4 stuff to talk about. We'll get to it. Talking about Sue a little bit more, we do get her sort of explaining how she went from, I suppose, like, not really talking, like Lynn sort of not talking to her anymore, and them living in the city and that sort of thing. How she went from there to suddenly being the leader of this new metal clan, Zaofu place. And just how she went on these crazy journeys, you know, as part of a pirate ship, you know, sandbender colony type stuff, and eventually, you know, bought this plot of land, you know, hired an architect. That architect eventually turned out to be Batar. They got married, and now she's kind of more of a, you know, family person. And I think it's a fun little story. I think it's the sort of backstory where you didn't need to show all that much about it. It was just these little connections that I think were notable to make. There was obviously some theories going around the time of this that, like, oh, one of the people in, like, the circus picture that we see there is, like, this kind of ball character who potentially looks like a younger Zahir, given that this is the debut of like, bald Zahir. But that turned out to not really be anything, but it would have been a nice connection if just Sue actually knew Zahir fairly well, and it was this sort of more betrayal thing, but they don't go down that road at all. But still, I like that they present this. This is where you get an aspect of Sue's personality, of just the fact that she sort of left to find her own way and ended up being really successful. And as Korra says, you know, it seems like you've more or less created the perfect life for yourself here. And the only regret on Sue's part is that Lynn isn't a part of it, and there's this, you know, chasm between them, basically. Because as we find out, Sue's made up with potential issues from the past with Toph. Lynn hasn't, and is holding on to all of this stuff. And that's another factor in the relationship, that, you know, they sort of both had their issues with their mother, but, like, Sue just immediately got past it all, whereas Lynn is still holding on to it. But mainly the issues are with Sue herself, as we'll touch on in the next episode. Anything else? I suppose the Tenzin, the Zahir scene. I tend to not get too much out of this. I like the Kaya Zahir fight. I think it's really, really cool. All of the bending sequences are very well done, and I think this and the fight with Bing Hua are definitely, like, Kaya's best fight sequences in terms of getting across how strong of a character she is. Other than that, it's just a bit like, what exactly is he doing here? Like, I think the end intent obviously is that here is the location of, like, the last, I suppose, line of poetry from Guru Lahima that Zahir hadn't read yet, and it's sort of meant to be the really important one, like, enter the void, empty and become wind. The whole setup from one of the first things he ever said, the idea of, like, Guru Lahima was said to, like, live the last couple of years of his life never touching the ground. The idea of flight, and we'll see that come back into play. It's just weird that last time we saw the Red Lotus, they just kind of got back together, and then all of a sudden, here's Zahir on this solo mission without any setup. And while I think we do catch up in the next episode with, like, the aftermath of this, and that he told them he was doing this, it's just a case of, okay, he likes poetry, but, like, can you properly, like, establish to us where the interest in airbender stuff actually came from? And this is where, like, more depth, obviously, with the character is absolutely needed. Because I like that he's kind of shown to be a good actor here, obviously, showing off that he's quite skilled already with the airbending. He does the gates. He sort of praises Milo for being a good teacher. Then he's sort of nice to Iki when explaining things to her later on. But the end result of this is just that he gets a glider, he gets the information he wanted, and everyone now knows that Zahir is around. Obviously, it means they're within Republic City. They also confirm that the airbenders in Republic City are going to head out to the Northern Air Temple with Tenzin, and that's really all there is to that, because obviously they're going to also have Korra send Opal to the Northern Air Temple once we get to the end of this arc as well. But I think that's everything I want to say in this review. It's a good episode, but it very much is the first episode of this arc, and I think there's much more important stuff that happens in the second episode, Old Wounds, but that's coming up next. Ai Wei, is there anything to say about him? Truth Seer, they sort of established those sort of powers that he can sense if people's lying. He ends up being a little bit more important as we get into the upcoming episodes, but other than that, not too much to say there. I think this arc is sort of interesting with like Asami in that, especially in these next couple of episodes, they don't really do all that much with her. We do get introduced to Varric again to just quickly catch up that, like, okay, he's working for Su Yin now, he's a good inventor. It makes sense with Zaofu at the front of technology that Su would kind of hire him back, but it's also meant to be another thing with Lin of just, we just saw, like, Varric directly, like, caused so many problems for everyone last book, and he was in prison. Lin has every right to want to, like, immediately rearrest this guy, but, like, Su Yin has just got past all of that and just hired him, and it's meant to signify that she's maybe a little bit too willing to give people a second chance, but also that Lin is perhaps a little bit too unwilling to give people a second chance, but that's the conflict between the characters. So that's been the review. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the episode. Thanks for watching this video, and bye.